Hello, and welcome to an early morning groggy episode of the Throwin MMA podcast. I'm your host, Adam Gerber, and I wasn't necessarily going to do a podcast this week. I just released a Dynamite interview with Yorgan De Castro. Go check that out if you haven't. He's fighting Greg Hardy tonight. But enough's gone on that I feel like it warrants an episode. There's enough to talk about now. Most of the media had been fairly hush-hush concerning the circumstances of the event. So, let's go over it, shall we? Where do we start? I guess, where do we start? Why don't we start with the thing that every single person was afraid was going to happen when this event was put together? One of the fighters testing positive. As of this morning, it's official. Jacaré Souza has tested positive for coronavirus. And it really couldn't feel worse. Luckily, oh my god. No one really seems too bothered, or like no one, and by no one I mean like the Florida government or Dana White himself. But Jacaré tested positive, so did both of Jacaré's cornermen. And in just a absolute storm of God-given thankful events, I can't even... like, if this had been anybody else on the card, this would have been a huge, huge issue. And I'm not here to be like, this fight shouldn't go on, you know, like, well, this fight shouldn't go on, but like, this card shouldn't go on, it's irresponsible to do this event, all that, but they would be in, the way that it was gone about, it seems, they would be in serious, serious trouble if anyone else had gotten this, because it seems to be just, they've done more tests, and it seems to just be contained to Jacaré and his cornermen. But Jacaré is pretty much the only person, if you watch the embeddeds, or especially the face-offs, the only person who's been consistently wearing a mask, other than his opponent, Uriah Hall, and our boy, our certified beauty, Yorgan De Castro. So if you watch the face-off, the only three people that wear a mask are Yorgan, Uriah Hall, and Jacaré. So Jacaré, thankfully, was wearing it. He's the one who has it. Uriah Hall was away from him, and they're the only ones who did like a social distancing face-off, where they faced off like over 2 meters away from each other. Everyone else was just like stood an extra foot. No one was wearing a mask and just stood like an extra foot away than they normally would, as if that was going to do anything. Like, you might as well get up in each other's face at that point. So the only person that has it is the only person that was really respecting the mask and the distancing rules. And thankfully, it seems that he also drove up on his own in his own car and didn't take a plane or anything. So he just drove up with all his cornermen. That's probably why they all have it. And can you? Oh my God, this still might be bad, because they were all walking around the hotel, and apparently, like, here's my thing: he wouldn't have even been at the weigh-in or the face-offs if they'd known he had it at that point. Which means the first tests from when they got there in the week hadn't been distributed yet. Which means that they were all going up and facing off against each other with no mask, like 2 feet away from each other, without even knowing whether or not the person had tested positive or negative for coronavirus yet. Oh, no. Oh my God, I don't even know what to say. They're so lucky that this is who it happened to. Like, we're still probably going to get a spike in, like, enjoy this, you guys. Enjoy these next 2 or 3 cards, because after these next 2 weeks are up, I am sure that a lot more people from this are going to start testing positive, and then that's going to put a kibosh on these events for sure. And it sucks because it's like all they had... like, all they had to do was wait. All they had to do was wait and make sure that you're holding face-offs before you have the test back. If this doesn't have an outbreak, it's literally just because it was the only person who stood away, far enough away, and had a mask on. It's this is unbelievable. Dominic Cruz comes in nicely. Jeremy Stevens missed weight. Weren't really sure whether or not that was going to happen for a while, but Calvin Kattar took it, and Jeremy Stevens is going to lose 30%. Gilbert Burns is offered to step in and fight Uriah Hall, step in for Jacaré Souza, and I wouldn't be opposed to that because I love Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert Burns is looking thicker than a Snicker. Like, oh my god. You've seen photos of him this week? Insane. And it would be great for Uriah Hall to get a fight back, because I don't know if you guys saw, but this is... Of course, he was very cordial, so it sucks to see that, but his preparation for this fight, I think he took a next level dedication than a lot of other people, because the only way he could access this gym in Fortis MMA was to go there, and he lived in his gym for the past couple weeks, just in the basement of his gym, away from his home and family and everything, and just isolated himself there. And the amount of sacrifice that he's put into that, it's really sad that this is the one fight that hasn't come to fruition. Of course, everyone's put in that sacrifice, but I think he's put in a unique amount for this. This is so weird. It's so weird that we're finding out now, like a day before the fight. You'd think if this was done the way that it should have been done, if you're going to ramp it up to obviously there's lessons to be learned, but you would think that they would have had this like by Wednesday. Bizarre. Like so lucky. So lucky that this was the one person. I can't get over that. Everything's back to normal though, because the UFC's like, this is really a return to normalcy because the fights are back on. I'm blown away by the way they're handling stuff. John Jones is in trouble with the law again. You know, everything's sort of coming full circle. Oh my god. On other news, Dana White's been saying to Stipe Miocic and he's been alluding to this for a while, that they might be moving on with the heavyweight division without him and stripping him of the title because of his eye injury and because he's been working as a first responder. So that would be another scumbag move, like as the cherry on top. All right, where are we now? Here we go. Let's break down this card, shall we? What should we start with? Start at the top, right? That's where you got to start. Ferguson versus Gaethje. Now, another reason I haven't done a podcast in a while is because there hasn't been fights, but what's been going on, I haven't really had a lot of good or unique stuff to say. I think a lot of people are so excited for this fight, and I just can't get myself excited for these top two fights because... And this is going to be the thing, you're going to be like, oh, well, yeah, you have an ethical problem with them putting fights on? Like, I just want to watch fights. I want to see fights too. It's not an ethical issue that you shouldn't be putting fights on during coronavirus because it could spread. It's more of because of coronavirus, a lot of these fights with high-profile fighters in big player spots are now going to be doing fights that don't mean a whole lot and are incredibly risky. Maybe not risky, but are... depriving other people of potential opportunities. Ferguson versus Gaethje is my main one. I got a problem with this. And people have been saying, why do you have a problem with this? This is going to be a great fight. Of course this is going to be a great fight. Are you kidding me? This is going to be probably the best fight on the card. My problem is Tony Ferguson's getting into 36 years old here. He has had a litany of injuries in the past. One of those main injuries has been major tears and major injuries to his leg, to his knee, to his forward knee, like his front leg that he stands on. And Gaethje is one of the most prolific leg kickers in the UFC and one of the most damaging strikers, including leg kicks, pretty much that we've seen at that weight class, which is one of the most devastating weight classes in the history of the company. So, what does that boil down to? That boils down to one half of the most significant fight in MMA history, which is Ferguson versus Khabib, being involved in a fight that isn't really necessary, but is still a really fun fight. But if you're going to do really fun fights, why are you including Tony Ferguson? Why are you including half of one of the potential most significant fights in history that's ready to happen, that we're waiting for it to happen? And this isn't, regardless of whether you think Ferguson or Gaethje, who's going to win, and we're going to get into that in a second, regardless who you think is going to win, this is going to be a war, and this is going to take a lot out of both guys. Okay, this is not going to be something where the other dude's going to go in and just style on him and prove a point and walk out of there, ready to fight next week or even next month. Okay, this is going to be a grueling, grudgy sludge match that's going to take a piece out of each person, and who knows when they're going to be ready to come back, and who knows what the injuries they're going to sustain are. Especially Ferguson, he's got a past history of injury in one of the prime target locations for one of Justin Gaethje's most significant and devastating weapons, which is the leg kick, and he throws it constantly and from every angle. These guys are going to go into each other and smash into each other over and over again, and it is going to result in one of the most exciting fights maybe we've ever seen, and nobody is disputing that. But what it is doing is it's putting in jeopardy Ferguson versus Khabib, which has absolutely no reason to have another obstacle in it at this point in time. It's been remade 5 times. A global pandemic got in the way the 5th time. Are you really going to put that against the fight and make it not worth happening? Can you imagine how much less steam and how much less historical significance is going to be on this fight if Tony Ferguson loses? The stakes of this one are so high, so much higher than who wins and who challenges for the belt, that there's no reason that Ferguson shouldn't have just been paid to wait, essentially. And I get that he wants it. He shouldn't be allowed to as a promotion. This is like promotional malpractice. Absolutely. This is promotionally the wrong decision. If you want to go about, if you're just throwing out rankings in the time of Corona and you're going to do exciting fights, there's not many more fun fights that you can have, but there's a ton of fun fights that you can put Justin Gaethje into main event this card that aren't putting Ferguson versus Khabib in jeopardy. As a fight fan and seeing that build and seeing what's been put into it historically, that fight should be protected at all costs. And right now it's being flagrantly risked for a short time payoff. Entertainment wise, historical, like fighting significant wise, and I think money wise, I don't think Ferguson versus Khabib is going to sell as well if Gaethje goes in and smokes Ferguson. And if Gaethje goes in and smokes Ferguson, I don't think Gaethje versus Khabib is going to sell as well as Ferguson versus Khabib was about to before this happened. Baffling decision on every angle by the UFC, business wise, meritocracy wise. And that's making me have trouble get excited for this card, is it's not only that they have no significance, I would have fine with that, just like getting back into the swing of fist fights in this time, I'm fine with that. It's that they have negative significance, They're putting the regular status quo, in jeopardy from this weird Corona pandemic matchmaking schedule. And there's no need to. Like, why can't Dustin Poirier Gaethje too? Poirier lives in Florida. There's just, oh my god, put Mike Perry in there. Mike Perry lives in Florida. Mike Perry versus Justin Gaethje. If you want to get wild with it, get wild with it. It's like we've rigidly kept ourselves to the same weight classes just enough to keep some semblance of meaning, and that almost makes it worse. Like, here, let's go to the next one. Dominic Cruz versus Henry Cejudo. What is this going to prove? Sure, he's the consensus greatest bantamweight of all time, but even a couple of years ago, his body wasn't what it used to be, and people are saying, well, he doesn't believe in ring rust. That doesn't make it not real, and even if ring rust isn't real, that doesn't change the fact that your body is almost like aging and decrepit. When he talks about needing to crawl out of bed every morning and go soak himself in the bath and soak his feet before he's able to move, or when people are commending his incredible mental strength for still fighting when to get dressed up to do TV appearances, he needs to tape his feet up and ankles up to put dress shoes on, that is inspiring, but it's also, what does that guy, even if he was once a great, his body has fallen apart to the point where what does that guy have for someone like Henry Cejudo? And is it worth finding out to the point that you're displacing talent like Peter Yan, who obviously can't fight right now because he's in Russia, or Aljamain Sterling, who, you know, maybe wouldn't be able to fight this month because I believe he's coming off an injury, but if you're still doing pay-per-views next month, there's a bit for Henry Cejudo, right? It's just absolutely bizarre to me, like the matchmaking in these two. But anyway, let's get back to the actual matchup of Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje. I think that Gaethje has a way better chance in this fight than most people are giving him credit for. I think that his wrestling is going to match up interestingly with Ferguson. I don't think Ferguson's going to be able to just dominate him in the grappling. Submission attack wise, damage wise, sure, but I think Gaethje will be able to stave off takedowns and hold his own down there. I don't think that Ferguson's just going to have this carte blanche, back pocket grappling, get out of jail free card if he gets in trouble. And I think he is going to get in trouble, Defensively, he is not the most sound fighter. And offensively, Justin Gaethje is an absolute wrecking machine. And not only is he a wrecking machine, lately he's been a controlled wrecking machine. All right? Like, people like to bring up how much damage he takes. He's taken almost no damage in his last 3 fights. If you're going to talk about Justin Gaethje and you're going to talk about the chance that he has versus Tony Ferguson and future fighters, I see this being discounted so often. People talk about, but he takes so much damage, he's reckless, he would never be able to keep, fighting against the top guys. We saw that already, actually. We saw it against Eddie Alvarez. We saw it against Dustin Poirier. Did he come out with the W? No, but he took them to the absolute brink in a way that nobody else has, except for when they were fighting each other. And do you know what came out of that? Is he completely changed his style. And in his last 3 fights, he's taken virtually no damage and walked away with first-round knockouts. All right? Is the level of competition lower? Sure, but you can't deny that he's drastically changed his game plan approach and his fighting style, because he would have taken so much more damage than he did fighting his old way against those previous opponents, even if they are a lower level. Justin Gaethje is a different animal, and he's a different machine. And the way he matches up with Ferguson is very, very good. He's a very bad style matchup from Tony Ferguson's perspective. Okay? Tony Ferguson likes to come in, constant pressure. That's what Gaethje wants. And you know what? What he wants now is to be able to counter that pressure. He wants to be able to pressure you and then counter you countering the pressure, instead of just coming in and being, a wrecking machine. He can jump into that mode whenever he wants now, but he's going to have Ferguson coming at him all night. And one of Ferguson's main weapons is to constantly be kicking with the legs and kicking to the body, whether it's teeps or just straight up like slamming front leg, like lead leg kicks. That's Gaethje's bread and butter all day. So there's definitely going to be some shin clashes in there, and when it comes down to pure durability of the legs, I have to give it to Gaethje. He hasn't had those major injuries and major surgeries that Ferguson's had. I'm really worried about Ferguson's age and past injuries in this, and how that's going to translate to, even if he wins, and let's get through that too. Even if Ferguson wins this, right? The toll that's going to take on him. How is that going to affect, and the age that he is, how is that going to affect the Tony Ferguson that we see eventually against Nurmagomedov? How is that going to, because fighters are never the same after they fight Gaethje. I think the only person who's looked better ever is Poirier. And I think that's probably part of the gift of youth. What are we going to be missing out on in terms of ability, What type of questions is this going to introduce after the eventual Nurmagomedov Ferguson fight? There's just so much. There's so much that's going to come out of this that just, I don't see how this fight is worth it. And honestly, if I had to pick between the two, I'd pick Gaethje for the win, because Ferguson's going to come forward. His boxing and head movement and defense isn't the best in the division, so when Gaethje finds his spots, he hits hard, and he will absolutely snowball the fight. I don't think he's going to fall into traps and I don't think the momentum's going to be reversed the same way it is if Gaethje catches Ferguson the same way Pettis did, you know? I think Gaethje's being really underlooked as an opponent here. I'm going to go Gaethje for the fight. That's part of why I hate this fight so much, is I think Gaethje's going to win. I think he's going to overpower him with knockout power. I think he's going to find his spots more than Ferguson is. I'd love for Ferguson to just outpace him. I'd love for Ferguson to stay on the outside and out-jab him. But I think Ferguson's going to go in there to prove a point. I think he's going to get caught coming in. And I think his legs are going to get chopped. And I think that their durability is really going to come into question in this fight. This is going to be an absolute grueling war. I hope Ferguson gets through it. But I see more paths to victory for Justin. I see more reliable paths to victory for Justin. But that's not the first time, we've said that about a Ferguson opponent, and then he seems to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat and the jaws of, just bizarre happenings. So it's going to be a great fight. If I had to put money in on it, I'd put Gaethje, but my heart is 100% behind Ferguson. Next we get Cejudo, and I seem to hate this guy every time until he fights, and then he just does something amazing that impresses me so much and is just like the definition of championship merit, and then the way he behaves outside of the ring just makes me hate him so much. I hate to love him, and I love to hate him. I think he's going to run through Dominic Cruz here. I don't see what Dominic Cruz is going to show Cejudo in his age and in his physical condition. I think there's a reason we haven't seen Cruz back in a very long time, and I think this is him snatching one last opportunity before he's resigned to a career of desk work that he's very, very good at. How specifically? Again, Cejudo's leg kicks. How isn't he? Cejudo's going to out-wrestle him, probably. Cejudo's leg kicks and just kicking game in general is going to be able to corral him more. I'd be very surprised if you saw Henry go out there and try and box him. But who knows? He tried to do that. He tried to do that to Marlon Moraes. I would be very surprised if Henry relies on trying to box him up. I'd say you're going to see a lot of leg kicks, probably some body kicks, a lot of leg kicks and takedowns from Cejudo, though. That's what I would say. Ngannou versus Rozenstruik. Like, once again, I think people are sleeping on Rozenstruik here. I've seen, we've seen from Francis Ngannou not necessarily a whole. If you're going to say from Justin Gaethje, if people are going to say from Justin Gaethje that we haven't seen enough from him in his last few performances to definitively say that he's changed his style and his way of fighting, then we definitely can't say that about Ngannou. So I'm not sure why everyone is so confident about him in this fight against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, because after coming back from his losses versus Derek Lewis and Stipe Miocic, he's just been knocking fools out super quick in the first round. So what does that really show us about his ability to handle long-term fight planning, interacting in exchanges, his general cardio, and his ability to keep the pace and keep his gas tank throughout the fight, and his ability to reach into his versatility as different toolboxes to deal with different scenarios. We haven't really seen more of him than being a powerhouse because he hasn't been able to show us more, he hasn't answered any of our questions. Rozenstruik, on the other hand, I know he has huge power. I know he can end a fight in an instant. I know he can destroy faces like he did against Overeem. And I've also seen an incredibly diverse skill set from him. He's incredibly flexible and throws up head kicks like it's nothing. His technical kickboxing is incredibly impressive, especially for a heavyweight. His speed is there. Like I said before, his power's there. And I think his game planning is generally better, and we've seen him go longer distances without gassing and still being dangerous. So as far as I'm concerned, I've seen more from Rozenstruik, and I think he's got more of a pedigree from his background in kickboxing. I'm going to go Rozenstruik. I think he's going to upset him. I think Rozenstruik with the knockout. I think it's going to be a huge upset. Or I had to throw this in. And I think a lot of people are overlooking this possibility. This could be a really, really boring staring contest, I think. These are two counter fighters who like to wait until someone overextends and overcommits and then punish them with their accuracy, their speed, and their insane power. And I think when they try to do that and they're both maybe a little bit too hesitant, I think we could see a second Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, where they just do nothing and stare at each other the whole time. That's what I think. I think that's a real possibility, and I just wanted to throw that out there in case I'm totally right. I can at least get that sort of satisfaction from what could potentially be a really boring fight or an absolute slobber knocker that ends in a brutal KO. Next, we got Stevens versus Kattar. Stevens, of course, missed weight and forfeits 30% of his money to Kattar. This is a great fight, and I think this is a chance for Kattar to really... Whenever you beat Jeremy Stevens, you solidify yourself as an elite at featherweight, and I think this is definitely Kattar's time to shine. Obviously, Stevens didn't have a great weight cut with the Corona time, and I think Kattar just has cleaner boxing, cleaner footwork. He's more precise. He's more willing to throw combos. He's less likely to fall into just throwing one-shot wingers. And when people do start throwing one-shot wingers at him, that's where he shines. You know, the only real losses I believe we've seen from Kattar are him getting out-grappled. Let me make sure yeah, pretty much. Yeah, people like Moicano and Zabit, really long fighters with good jabs and technical boxing, and he's able to overcome that, and even once he overcomes that, it's the grappling that takes him. I don't think Stevens has that reservoir. I think he's just going to try and bang with him the whole time, and I think Kattar might win this by KO with his he might Boston finish him with his fantastic boxing. Hardy versus Yorgan De Castro. Yorgan De Castro, of course, a Throwin Bones certified beauty. We're with him 100%, and I would honestly pick him anyways. I think he's got a more complete game than Hardy. I think he's got better conditioning than Hardy, and I think he hits harder than Hardy, honestly. Especially that performance against Tafa was so much more technically sound than anything we've seen from Hardy. Tafa as an opponent, I think, is more... formidable than anyone Greg Hardy has faced so far, and he was beaten more impressive than any of Greg Hardy's opponents have been beaten so far. So going with De Castro on this one and his thunderous leg kicks, and he's going to continue to be a Throwin Bones certified beauty, of course. Cerrone versus Pettis. Oh my god, guys, there's so many on this one to talk to. Cerrone versus Pettis in the why are you guys still doing this fight? Winner and loser should retire. Honestly, going with Pettis again on this one. Donald Cerrone just got beat up a bunch of times recently, and he hasn't taken enough time off to truly recover, I think. His brain. Pettis won last time by thumping him in the body. Pettis has beaten Wonderboy recently, and even though he's had some more low-profile losses, that's easily more impressive than anything Donald Cerrone's done in the past couple years. Even if you think back to Cerrone's run, where he seemed to have it back. Who did he beat? He beat Alexander Hernandez and Ali Quinta and someone else. And I can't remember. That's disrespectful, and I apologize. But still, none of those guys are on Wonderboy's level. Pettis, on the other hand, put up a good showing against Diaz, probably a better showing than Cowboy did. He's got a win over Cowboy. Gonna go with Pettis on this one, but neither of these guys should be doing it anymore. Fabricio Verdum versus Alexei Oleinik. They're the same age, so the oldness doesn't really matter. I think Verdum isn't just going to get out-grappled by Oleinik the way that Oleinik needs to have that grappling advantage to win against people who out-athleticism him, which I think Verdum does, and Verdum's just got much crisper, much more suffocating and effective striking than Oleinik, so this is a pretty easy pick for Verdum. Carla Esparza versus Michelle Watterson. If Michelle Watterson can stay away from the takedown and avoid getting completely wrestle-fucked, she's probably got this one because she's just going to out-cardio and out-strike Carla Esparza. Vincente Luque versus Nico Price. Great fight. This one's going to be super exciting, I think, but I also think a couple years ago when Luque beat Price by submission, he looked much more technically clean, much more sound, much more together, much more willing to throw combos and put a game plan together, and then more deep in the grappling to be able to submit Price. As far as I'm concerned, that hasn't really changed. Luque's only fought better and better competition and looked better and better against them. He looked pretty decent, especially in the first round against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and Nico Price has sort of been here and there, lost one, won one, and Hasn't really beaten anyone nearly as impressive as Luque has. So I'm going to go with another impressive win for Luque. His game plan, his boxing especially, his jab, has looked so much cleaner than when they first fought. And that was sort of the beginning of his evolution. He seems to have sort of fully evolved. And I think we're really going to see how much better he is than he was when he first fought Nico Price in 2017. I think, though, it's just hard to quantify how much Nico Price has gotten better because of the way he wins. With Luque, it's so easy to see a system that he's worked on, that a sort of a flow chart of, if this works, do this, if that works, do that. Figuring out setting patterns and breaking patterns for his opponent, whereas Nico Price just sort of explodes with some crazy, wild, unorthodox stuff that he makes up on the spot. And it's really hard to quantify that as far as improving on that style goes. The step up he had against Jeff Neal, he just sort of got handled by Jeff Neal. Definitely got to go with Luque, maybe even by knockout on this one. Charles Rosa versus Bryce Mitchell. I got Bryce Mitchell because he's looked incredible on the ground since he came back from his testicle injury, where he with a drill bit, he got his scrotum caught in a drill bit, ripped his nuts off, fell off a 10-foot ladder, knocked himself out, woke up, crawled into his truck in the middle of a farm field, drove himself to the hospital, and saved his nads. A man who's gone through that. I don't really think number 45 featherweight is going to get in his way. Charles Rosa, I haven't really seen anything super impressive from him. I just see him getting out-grappled by Bryce Mitchell in this one. And then Ryan Spann versus Sam Alvey. Ryan Spann is going to knock Sam Alvey completely unconscious. He's so much taller, longer. His boxing is crisp, and Sam Alvey is just... He's been Sam Alvey for a while, and that's what he is. He's going to stand there and wait for a counter and try and hit him with a left... Was he orthodox or southpaw? I can't remember. He's going to try and hit him with a lead hook, check hook on the way in, and he's going to mean mug him with the worst fight face ever, maybe aside from Darren Till. It's going to be a weird fight. Ryan Spann, though, is probably going to impress. This is a great fight card. I'm excited to see fights again. I hope Jacaré Souza having coronavirus and the UFC not telling the fighters who had and who hadn't had it before they literally faced off inches away from each other. Yay. I hope that doesn't mess up future events. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, though. Oh my god, that's probably the worst thing we could have happen. The only reprieve is that they were the only ones to social distance and wear a mask, and he didn't fly there. Oh boy, what a weird time to be a fight fan. What a weird time. If you haven't caught my interview with Jorgen De Castro before his fight with Greg Hardy, please go do that now. It's a great interview, and make sure you support him on the pay-per-view. That's a great way to get more invested in an already very weird card, and it's great to get this investment wherever you can, because those top two fights, they're fun fights, they're interesting fights stylistically, but in terms of having questions to answer and having intrigue behind them, I don't think they have a whole lot other than, the repercussions from the main event, the repercussions that it's going to have on the potential Khabib Ferguson fight that, not only everyone wants, but is one of the most significant sporting events in the history of the world. So, not to be melodramatic or anything. Enjoy the hostilities, boys. And girls. Everyone enjoy it equally.